The morning I found my bridge destroyed, I knew this wasn't just some accident. This was HOA Karen's doing. She thought she could control everything, even nature itself. What she didn't know was that I had one powerful card to play the stream running right through our properties. This is the story of how I turned the tables. And trust me, it's one you won't forget. Let us know where you're watching from today, and if you're new here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join our growing community. I woke up that morning to the sound of silence, a silence that didn't feel right. Usually, the gentle trickle of water under my bridge greeted me as I sipped my first cup of coffee. But today, something was off. I grabbed my jacket and walked down the gravel path, my boots crunching against the frost-covered stones. When I reached the edge of the property, my heart sank. The bridge was gone. Not just damaged, it was bulldozed, torn apart like someone had ripped the heart right out of my land. The wooden beams I had sanded, stained, and sealed with my own hands now lay in a twisted pile in the mud. I stood there, gripping the handle of my coffee mug so hard I thought it would crack, the warmth of the coffee doing nothing to stop the cold fury rising in me. There was only one person bold and petty enough to pull a stunt like this, Karen. Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, with her bleached blonde hair, designer sunglasses, and a voice that could slice through steel. She had been after me for months, nitpicking every single thing I did on my property, the length of my grass, the color of my mailbox, even the way I parked my truck. Nothing escaped her prying eyes. And now, this. I crouched by the edge of the stream, running my hand through the icy water that still flowed quietly as if nothing had happened. That bridge wasn't just a walkway, it was a memory. My father and I had built it years ago, back when he was still strong enough to hold a hammer. I could still hear his voice, deep and steady, telling me, "A good bridge isn't just about getting from one side to the other, son. It's about standing strong no matter what comes your way." I clenched my jaw. Karen had no idea what line she just crossed. By the time I got back to the house, my coffee was stone cold, but my determination burned hotter than ever. I set the mug down on the counter and picked up my phone. There was only one way to confirm my suspicion. I dialed the HOA office, and sure enough, they had approved the removal of the bridge after Karen filed a complaint. Her reason? She claimed it obstructed the natural view of the lake. Natural view. I laughed bitterly. That bridge had been here long before she even bought her overpriced McMansion across the water. I had maintained it every season, repaired every loose nail, and kept it safe for anyone who wanted to cross to the small fishing dock I built at the far end. This was personal. She wanted control, and when she couldn't have it, she destroyed it. I stormed back outside, my fists still clenched. The wreckage looked worse now that the morning sun revealed every splinter and broken plank. I started picking up the pieces, tossing them into a pile, my mind racing. Karen thought she could bulldoze my life. She had no idea who she was messing with. As I hauled another broken beam onto the stack, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. Across the water, standing on her perfectly manicured lawn, was Karen. Even from this distance, I could see that smug little smirk plastered across her face. She raised her hand in a mocking wave, as if she were proud of what she had done. My blood boiled. Enjoying the view. I muttered under my breath. She couldn't hear me, but the venom in my tone was enough for me to feel some satisfaction. I raised a hand not to wave back, but to point at the ruined bridge, silently promising her that this wasn't over. Karen underestimated me. She saw a man with a quiet life and thought I'd just roll over. But I've lived on this land for years. I know every bend of that stream, every root and stone. If she thought destroying a bridge would break me, she was dead wrong. I took one last look at the pile of wreckage and then turned to the shed. My tools were still there, lined up neatly on the wall. A plan was already forming in my head. This wasn't just about rebuilding. This was about taking back control and teaching Karen a lesson she'd never forget. By the time the sun dipped behind the hills, I had cleared most of the debris. My hands were sore and my back ached, but I didn't care. I stood there, staring at the stream, watching how it curved and twisted around the property line. An idea sparked in my mind, a dangerous, clever, and downright poetic idea. If Karen wanted to play games with the land, maybe I could let the land play back. The next morning, I didn't even get a chance to drink my coffee before I heard her voice. It carried across the lake like nails scraping a chalkboard. I stepped outside, and there she was, Karen, standing on the far side of the lake path with her arms crossed, wearing her HOA Queen Bee look oversized sunglasses, a bright pink windbreaker, and a self-satisfied smirk that made my stomach turn. "Well," she called out, "I see you finally cleaned up that ugly mess you called a bridge. Took you long enough. I gripped the porch railings so hard, I thought the wood would splinter." "What did you just say?" I shouted back, my voice sharper than I intended. She pulled down her sunglasses just enough for me to see those cold, calculating eyes. "You heard me. That bridge was an eyesore. I had the right to file a complaint." The HOA agreed, and now look, the view is so much better. My fist clenched at my sides. "Better that bridge has been here longer than your house. Karen, it wasn't hurting anyone. You had no right to bulldoze something that isn't yours." Karen gave me that fake, syrupy smile she always used when she was about to deliver a threat. Oh, I had every right. The path to the lake falls under HOA jurisdiction, and if you think you're rebuilding that monstrosity, think again. I'll have it torn down the second you lay a plank. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. "Karen, that path runs through my property, my land. That bridge was mine, built by my father and me. You crossed a line." Her smile widened as if she was savoring my anger. "Your property still falls under HOA guidelines. You agreed to them when you moved here. You think you're special. The rules apply to everyone, even you." I stepped off the porch and walked closer to the edge of the water, my boots sinking slightly into the muddy bank. "Rules? Don't talk to me about rules, Karen. The only rule you care about is whatever makes you feel powerful. But you've gone too far this time." She raised her chin. "Don't test me. Mr. Harper, I've taken down tougher men than you. Rebuild that bridge, and I'll make sure you're fined every day until you can't afford to stay here. I'll drag you through every HOA meeting, every court hearing, and you'll lose." Her words were like gasoline thrown on a fire, already raging inside me. I wanted to yell back, to tell her exactly what I thought of her, but I knew that's what she wanted a scene, an excuse to paint me as the unreasonable neighbor. So instead, I just stared her down, letting the silence stretch between us like a drawn bowstring. "Finally," I said quietly, "you're going to regret this." Her smile faltered for just a second. Maybe she heard something in my voice, a promise, not a threat. Then she put her sunglasses back on and turned to walk away, tossing her parting words over her shoulder. "We'll see about that." I watched her retreat, my jaw tight and my pulse pounding. This wasn't just about a bridge anymore. This was about principle, about standing up to someone who thought they could bully everyone into submission. I wasn't going to be her next trophy. I spent the rest of the day pacing my property, studying every inch of the stream. Karen believed she held all the cards because she had the HOA behind her, but what she didn't know was that the land and water rights here were complicated. I'd inherited this place from my father, and he'd made sure to keep records of every boundary, every easement, every clause in the old property deeds. Somewhere in those dusty files was the proof I needed, the proof that this stream and the bridge were legally mine. That evening, I dug through my father's old wooden chest. It was filled with maps, documents, and yellowed property surveys from decades ago. I laid them out across the kitchen table, the smell of old paper mixing with the faint aroma of coffee. As I traced the lines of the stream on a 40-year-old map, my eyes landed on something that made me grin for the first time in days. The original deed clearly stated that the stream was part of my property, not HOA land. Karen's threats suddenly felt hollow. If I played my cards right, I could not only rebuild the bridge, but also make her eat her own words. Just as I was packing up the papers, I heard a knock on the door. It wasn't a friendly one. It was sharp, authoritative, like someone wanted to start a fight. I opened the door to find Karen standing there with two other HOA board members. Her lips curled into a grin. "We just came by to remind you," she said, "that any unauthorized construction will result in immediate fines. We'll be keeping an eye on you." I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "Is that so?" "Well, thanks for the reminder. Karen, I'll make sure to keep everything legal." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't respond. Maybe she could tell I wasn't intimidated anymore. She turned on her heel and strutted back to her car, her minions following close behind. As I closed the door, I couldn't help but smile. She thought she'd won the battle, but she had no idea I was already planning the war. That night, as I sat at the kitchen table with my father's old property maps spread out, I couldn't stop thinking about the bridge, not just about how it had been torn down, but about how it came to be in the first place. That bridge was more than a pile of wood and nails. It was part of my family's story. I closed my eyes and let the memories wash over me. It was almost 25 years ago when my father and I first built it. I was in my early 20s, fresh out of trade school, full of energy and stubborn pride. Dad had this old way of doing things, no shortcuts, no cheap fixes. If you're going to build something, build it to last. He always said he believed a man's work should outlive him. I remember standing knee-deep in the stream, hammer in hand, while Dad measured and marked the beams with his old carpenter's pencil. He wore that faded flannel shirt, the one with the elbows worn thin, and his calloused hands moved with steady confidence. "Son," he told me, "you can't rush something like this. A bridge connects more than just two sides. It connects people, memories, and purpose." We spent weeks on that project. Every evening after work, I'd find Dad already out there with a saw, cutting planks or driving posts into the stream bed. I can still smell the freshly cut cedar, still hear the ringing echo of nails sinking into wood. We worked in silence most of the time, but every now and then he'd tell me stories about how he built the barn on his father's land when he was just a teenager. "You see," he'd say with that twinkle in his eye, "good work lasts. It tells people you cared." When we finally laid the last plank and stepped back to look at our creation, I remember Dad resting a hand on my shoulder. "Looks solid," he said with a proud smile. "One day, when I'm gone, I hope you'll take care of this place the way I have. This bridge will be your reminder of where you come from." That memory stung now. Dad's been gone for almost a decade, but every time I crossed that bridge, I felt a piece of him walking with me. It was more than just wood and nails. It was a promise I made to him to keep this land alive and whole. And now, thanks to Karen, it was in ruins. The next morning, I walked down to the wreckage again, but this time I wasn't just angry. I was determined. As I sifted through the broken boards, I found one of the original planks Dad and I had cut all those years ago. It was weathered, split in half, but I could still see the old pencil mark where Dad had measured it. I ran my hand along it, feeling the grooves and remembering the day he carved that line. That was the moment I knew I couldn't let Karen win. She might have power in HOA meetings, but she didn't have history on her side. This land had roots deeper than any rulebook she could wave in my face. As I carried the salvaged wood back to the shed, I thought about how many times that bridge had been the centerpiece of life here. It was where I taught my son to fish, holding his small hands as we dangled lines over the railing. It was where I'd sat with my wife on warm summer nights, watching fireflies blink across the water. Every memory felt like another reason to fight back. Later that afternoon, I stood by the stream again, this time with a notebook in hand. I sketched out a new design, sturdier than before. If I was going to rebuild, it wouldn't just be a replacement, it would be a tribute. I wanted something that would make my father proud, something that said, "You didn't break me, Karen. You only made me stronger." But even as I planned the new bridge, my mind kept circling back to one thought. What if I didn't just rebuild it? What if I turned this whole thing on its head? What if I used the stream itself to outsmart Karen? As the sun set, I walked the property line, tracing the curves of the stream with a long stick. I noticed how it bent sharply near Karen's yard, almost like nature had drawn a boundary just for her. And then it hit me: if I diverted the stream just a few feet over, I could cut off her access to the lake altogether. Her precious view would turn into an island. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like the perfect revenge. Not petty, not illegal, just nature finding a new course, with a little help from me. That night, I put Dad's old pencil back into my shirt pocket and made myself a quiet promise I'd rebuild the bridge, but on my terms. And before I laid the first plank, I'd make sure Karen knew she couldn't bulldoze me or my family's legacy ever again. The next morning, I poured myself a strong cup of black coffee and sat down at the kitchen table with one mission: to find the loophole that would bury Karen and her HOA nonsense once and for all. The stack of old documents I'd pulled from my father's chest the night before sat like a treasure trove of truth. Somewhere in these yellowed pages was the evidence I needed. I started with the property deed. The parchment was thick, and the ink had faded, but the words were still legible. As I traced my finger along the lines, I read the most important sentence out loud. The stream and its adjoining land up to 25 feet on both sides shall remain the property of the landowner. My land, not HOA property, not Karen's playground, mine. I felt a rush of relief and fire. If Karen wanted to fight over what she thought she owned, I'd make sure she learned the hard way. I wasn't just another homeowner, I was the rightful steward of this land. And the law was on my side. I spent the next few hours digging through every single HOA document I could find. I pulled up emails, printed newsletters, and even the outdated community rules and aesthetic guidelines book that Karen loved to wave around like it was scripture. The more I read, the more I realized something important: Karen didn't know what she was talking about. The HOA had jurisdiction over community areas, but my bridge wasn't on community property. It was squarely on my private land, and the stream, according to both the deed and the county records, didn't fall under their authority at all. That afternoon, I drove down to the county clerk's office. I wanted official proof, something I could throw in Karen's face if she tried to challenge me again. The clerk, a middle-aged man with glasses perched on the tip of his nose, dug into their archive system. He returned with a certified copy of the land survey from decades ago, the very same survey my father had referenced. When I asked him to verify the HOA boundaries, he chuckled. "Son," he said, tapping the map, "your stream isn't anywhere near their jurisdiction. They can file all the complaints they want, but legally, they don't have a leg to stand on." I thanked him and tucked the documents carefully into my folder. I left the office feeling like I'd just loaded a bullet into a chamber, a bullet with Karen's name on it. When I got home, I called my neighbor, John. He'd lived here even longer than I had and knew how Karen operated. She's all bark. John told me. She thrives on intimidation. But if you've got the law on your side, she won't have much to say. I've got more than the law, I said, glancing at the papers spread across my kitchen counter. I've got a plan. John laughed. Something tells me she's not going to like that. She doesn't have to like it, I replied. She just has to learn when to back off. That evening, I saw Karen strutting along the opposite bank of the lake, phone pressed to her ear. She looked like she was barking orders, probably to her HOA board. When she noticed me standing on my property, arms crossed and smirking, she shot me a glare that could curdle milk. I raised the folder of legal documents just high enough for her to see. "What's that?" she shouted across the water. "Oh, just proof," I said, my voice calm and deliberate, "that you don't own this stream, Karen, and you never did." Her face twisted in frustration, but she quickly recovered, shouting back, "We'll see what the board has to say about that." I couldn't help but laugh. "You do that, but this time, Karen, the law isn't on your side." That night, I sat on my porch, sipping a second cup of coffee as I stared at the moonlight glinting off the stream. It wasn't just about rebuilding the bridge anymore. It was about sending a message. If Karen thought she could bulldoze my history and my rights, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. I pulled out a notepad and started sketching again. But this time, my focus wasn't only on the new bridge. I was drawing plans to redirect the stream, a small trench here, a slope adjustment there. With the right equipment and a few well-placed channels, I could nudge the water just enough to create a narrow moat around Karen's property. It wouldn't be illegal, and it wouldn't even flood her land, but it would isolate her precious backyard like the island fortress she thought she ruled. The idea made me grin. I could already picture her face when she realized her view came with a price. Before going to bed, I laid the documents neatly on my nightstand, as if they were a weapon I'd draw in the coming war. Karen had declared her battle, but she didn't know I'd already won the first round. The stream was my ally now, and with it, I'd do something she'd never see coming. The next morning, I stood at the edge of the stream with a measuring tape, a notebook, and a cup of coffee that was already going cold. The early sun lit up the surface of the water, turning it into a sheet of silver. My boots sank slightly into the damp earth as I walked along the bank, studying every bend and slope like a man reading a battle map. I wasn't just planning to rebuild my bridge anymore, I was planning to make a statement. Karen thought she could destroy something I built with my father's hands, something rooted in my family's history. Well, I was about to use the land itself to teach her a lesson. The idea had started as a spark the night before, but now it had grown into a full-fledged plan. If I cut a narrow channel about 3 feet wide along the left side of the bank, I could reroute part of the stream. It would naturally flow around the far corner of Karen's property, creating a shallow trench that separated her yard from the rest of the lake path. Her manicured backyard, the one she loved to show off, would be surrounded by water like her own private island. And the beauty of it all, it wasn't illegal. I wasn't damaging her property. I was just letting nature find a new course. With a little nudge from me, I called up an old friend, Mike, who owned a small excavation company. He owed me a favor from years back when I helped him repair a barn roof after a bad storm. When I explained what I needed, he chuckled. "You want to build a moat around her house," he said, his voice full of amusement. "Let's call it a natural water feature," I replied with a grin. Mike agreed to bring his crew out in a few days. That gave me time to finalize the design. I spent hours walking up and down the property, marking points with bright orange stakes and measuring depths. Every time I hammered a stake into the ground, I imagined Karen's reaction, her voice rising, her arms flailing, and it fueled me to keep going. Later that day, John stopped by. He leaned against my fence, watching me pace the yard with my notepad. "What on earth are you up to now?" he asked, a sly smile creeping across his face. I smirked. "Let's just say I'm going to give Karen exactly what she deserves. Whatever it is, I want a front row seat." John laughed. "She's been a thorn in everyone's side for years. Maybe it's about time someone turned the tables." I gave him a nod. "Trust me, she won't forget this one." That evening, as the sun dipped low and turned the sky a fiery orange, I sat on my porch, sketching out the final details. I planned exactly where the trench would start just a few feet downstream of where my bridge once stood, and where it would reconnect with the main flow. It was going to be clean, efficient, and impossible for Karen to stop without admitting she had no authority over this land. I could already hear the HOA meetings in my head, Karen fuming, accusing me of sabotage, while the rest of the board tried to figure out how to respond. But by then, it would be too late. The stream would be set in its new course, and the only thing she could do was live with the consequences of her arrogance. On the morning of the third day, Mike and his crew rolled in with their backhoe and a dump truck full of gravel. The rumble of the engine sent a thrill down my spine. This was it. As they unloaded equipment, I gave them a quick briefing, pointing out the markers I'd placed along the bank. Mike grinned. "I've done a lot of jobs, but this is definitely one of the more creative ones. You sure you're ready for the fallout?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Karen started this war. I'm just finishing it." By mid-morning, the first trench was carved. The sound of metal cutting through earth was almost therapeutic. I stood with my arms crossed, watching as the stream slowly began to trickle into the new channel. The water moved lazily at first, then faster as the path deepened. It wasn't long before the flow had split, curling around toward Karen's property just like I'd planned. And, of course, that's when Karen showed up. She came marching down her lawn in her bright yellow rain boots and a furious expression, waving her phone like a weapon. "What do you think you're doing?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. I turned to her calmly, a faint smile on my lips. "Just improving the natural flow of the stream. Karen, nothing illegal here. Just working on my own property." "You can't do this," she screamed, her face turning red. "You're flooding my yard." I gestured toward the water, which wasn't even touching her lawn yet. "Looks to me like everything's perfectly under control. Maybe you should take a step back before you get your shoes wet." Her jaw dropped. "I'll call the HOA. I'll call the county. You'll regret this." "Go ahead," I said. I already spoke with the county. Turns out this stream belongs to me. And the HOA, they have no authority here. The look on her face was priceless, a mix of shock and outrage, as if the world had suddenly stopped revolving around her. By the end of the day, The trench was complete. The water flowed smoothly, creating a narrow barrier that perfectly outlined the edge of Karen's property. I stood there with Mike, watching the current settle into its new rhythm. Mike said, "This is kind of poetic." I chuckled. Yeah, poetic justice. The morning of the big day broke crisp and clear, with a golden sun rising over the horizon. I woke up before dawn, a mix of determination and anticipation buzzing in my veins. Today was the day I'd finish what I started the day Karen would see, with her own eyes, that I wasn't a man to be pushed around. I poured myself a quick cup of coffee, grabbed my work gloves, and stepped outside. The air was cool, carrying the earthy scent of damp soil from yesterday's trench work. Mike's crew was already pulling up the driveway, the rumble of their diesel engines rolling through the stillness like distant thunder. "Ready to finish this masterpiece?" Mike asked with a grin as he hopped out of the truck. "More than ready," I said, shaking his hand firmly. "Let's make it happen." The plan for today was straightforward: deepen the trench, stabilize the banks with gravel, and let the full current of the stream redirect into its new path. With the groundwork already in place, it was time to let nature take over with a little nudge from a backhoe. By mid-morning, the machines roared to life. The backhoe's arm swung gracefully, scooping out soil and smoothing the trench like a sculptor carving clay. I stood by, directing the crew and keeping a close eye on the flow. The water was starting to pick up speed, swirling into the channel and pulling away from the old course that had always favored Karen's side of the property. Of course, Karen showed up. I knew she would. It was like she could smell progress from a mile away. She came barreling down her driveway in a pristine white SUV, slamming the door so hard I thought the glass would shatter. "What do you think you're doing?" she screamed, her voice echoing across the lake. I didn't even flinch. "Morning." "Karen," I said calmly, "just doing some landscaping. Perfectly legal landscaping, I might add." Her eyes widened as she saw the trench cutting a clean line near her backyard. "Landscaping. You're diverting the stream. This is destruction. You're ruining my property value." I crossed my arms and stared her down. "Your property, Karen. This is my land, my stream. You've got no say in what I do here. Not after you bulldozed my bridge." Karen's face turned crimson. "I had every right. The HOA. The HOA doesn't own this water." I interrupted, pulling out the certified county document from my back pocket. "I do. And if you want to challenge that, you can take it up with the county clerk. They'll tell you exactly what they told me. This stream has nothing to do with your HOA." For once, Karen had no immediate comeback. She just stood there, seething. Her lips pressed so tight they turned white. I could see the realization setting in she had overplayed her hand. Mike and his crew kept working, unfazed by Karen's tantrum. The sound of the backhoe drowned out her muttered threats. Gravel poured into the trench, locking it in place, and I watched with satisfaction as the stream fully committed to its new path. The water curled around the far corner of Karen's property, creating a glimmering moat just as I'd envisioned. By noon, her backyard was effectively an island. Karen stood at the edge of the new trench, staring at the shallow but undeniable barrier. "This is harassment," she finally shouted. "I'll have you fined." "Arrested." I couldn't help but laugh. "For what?" "For using my own land. Face it. Karen, you can't control everything. Not me. Not the stream. Maybe it's time you learned that." As the crew wrapped up for lunch, I walked along the trench, inspecting every inch of the work. It looked solid, clean, and deliberate. Exactly the kind of thing my father would have admired a job done right. I felt a swell of pride, not just for outsmarting Karen, but for standing up for what was mine. Mike slapped me on the shoulder. "I've done a lot of projects, but this one's going to be a story I tell for years. You've got guts." "Harper, not guts," I said with a grin. Just tired of being pushed around. Karen spent the rest of the afternoon pacing her lawn, making frantic phone calls. I caught bits and pieces of her conversations: illegal water diversion, environmental damage, and even personal vendetta. None of it stuck. The county officials I had already spoken to made it clear as long as I wasn't diverting water onto her property or causing flooding, I was within my rights, and I made damn sure the work was precise. By sunset, The job was done. The trench gleamed with fresh water, curving like a silver ribbon around her yard. My new bridge post stood ready on my side, waiting for the planks I'd lay in the coming days. As the last rays of sunlight faded, I stood there with my arms crossed, watching Karen glare at me from across her new island. She didn't yell this time. She didn't even speak. She just turned and stormed back to her house, slamming the door behind her. That silence was sweeter than any victory speech. The next morning, I was sipping my coffee on the porch when I saw a small crowd gathering near Karen's property. 3 SUVs and a couple of sedans lined the road, all with HOA board stickers on their windshields. I couldn't help but chuckle. It looked like the whole circus had come to town. From the sound of it, Karen had wasted no time rallying her troops. Her shrill voice cut through the air as she waved her arms, pointing furiously at the new water channel that now separated her pristine lawn from the rest of the neighborhood. "Do you see this?" she screeched to the group. "This is sabotage. This man has cut me off from the lake. We need to make him pay for this." I leaned back in my chair and took another sip of coffee, letting the scene play out like a live show. One of the HOA board members, a man named Greg, who was more bark than bite, finally spoke up. "Karen," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "are we sure he's done something illegal here? I mean, this is his land, right?" Karen spun on him like a hawk. "Illegal or not, it's unacceptable. We're the HOA. We decide what happens here. If we let him get away with this, what's next? Neon paint on mailboxes, rusty trucks in the front yard." Greg glanced across the trench, where I was sitting with the world's most satisfied grin. "Well, the county says it's his stream. We can't override that. And, it does look kinda nice. Like a natural water feature or something." Karen's jaw dropped. "Are you kidding me? Greg, you think this is nice? My property value will plummet because of this nonsense." I finally decided to make my presence known. I set down my coffee, walked down to the bank of the trench, and called out, "Morning. Everyone, beautiful day. Isn't it? The stream's looking great today, don't you think?" The group turned to look at me, and I could see the unease in their eyes. They weren't here to pick a fight. They were here because Karen demanded it. "Harper," Karen snapped, "you're gonna fix this right now, or I swear You'll what?" I interrupted, my voice steady but firm. "Call the HOA again. File another complaint. Go ahead, Karen, but this time you're not bulldozing me. I've got the law on my side, and every bit of this work is 100% legal. You might want to pick another battle." For a moment, there was silence. Then, to my surprise, one of the other board members, an older woman named Marlene, cleared her throat and spoke up. "Karen, I think Harper's right," Marlene said. "We've been giving him a hard time for no reason. That bridge he had, it wasn't hurting anyone. And this, well, honestly, it's kinda clever. Maybe we should just leave him alone." Karen whipped around, glaring at Marlene like she'd just betrayed her deepest secret. "Are you serious? You're taking his side." Marlene shrugged. "I'm taking the side of reason. He's done nothing wrong. And frankly, Karen, people are tired of these constant fights." Greg and a few others murmured in agreement. I saw Karen's face twist in disbelief as she realized her little army wasn't as loyal as she thought. "You all are useless," Karen barked. "If you won't do anything, I'll handle it myself." She stormed toward me, stopping at the edge of the trench. "You think you're clever. Harper, this isn't over. I'll sue you for every dime you have." I smiled, leaning casually against the fence post. "Go ahead, Karen. But before you waste your lawyer's time, you might want to ask them who owns this stream, because I already have the answer, and it's not you." Her face turned crimson, and for a moment I thought she might actually jump across the water to take a swing at me. But instead, she let out a frustrated scream and stomped back toward her group. By afternoon, the HOA meeting dissolved into chaos. From my porch, I overheard bits of their conversation. "We don't have the authority," and "Karen, you need to calm down," and finally, "This is your fight, not ours." One by one, the board members got in their cars and left, leaving Karen standing alone by the edge of her property, glaring at me like I was the devil himself. I raised my coffee mug in a mock toast. Better luck next time. Karen. She spun on her heel and stormed back into her house, slamming the door so hard I heard it echo across the lake. That evening, I walked down to the trench and stood there for a long while, watching the water glide smoothly through its new course. It was peaceful, the kind of peace you feel when you know you've fought the right fight and come out stronger. But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. My new bridge was still just a plan on paper, and I intended to build it bigger and better than ever. This wasn't just about winning, it was about reclaiming what Karen tried to take from me. The morning after the HOA fiasco, I woke up with a clear mind and a plan. The war with Karen wasn't just over, I had won. And now it was time to rebuild what she had tried to destroy. Not just for me, but for the memory of my father, and every moment tied to that bridge. I spent the early hours hauling the salvage planks from the shed, each one cleaned and sanded until it looked new. The smell of freshly cut cedar filled the air, taking me back to those long summer days with Dad. For this rebuild, I wasn't cutting corners. This bridge was going to be stronger, wider, and anchored so deep that even a bulldozer wouldn't touch it. By mid-morning, I had the foundation posts in place. I stood knee-deep in the stream, hammer in hand, pounding each support beam into the earth until it felt like part of the land itself. Every strike of the hammer echoed like a heartbeat, steady, relentless. John wandered over from his property, leaning on the fence and watching with a grin. "Looks like you're building a fortress." "Harper," he said. "Damn right," I replied, wiping sweat from my brow. "This time, no one's tearing it down." He chuckled. "I have to admit, watching Karen implode yesterday was the best entertainment I've had in years." "Yeah, she's quiet now," I said, "but I'm not counting on it lasting. This bridge will speak for me, louder than anything she can say." By afternoon, the frame was complete. The planks I laid down creaked under my boots as I walked across, testing each one for strength. The sight of that bridge spanning the new course of the stream brought a lump to my throat. It wasn't just a structure, it was a declaration that I wasn't going anywhere. Just as I was securing the last railing, I heard footsteps. I turned to see Karen standing a few yards away, her arms crossed, and her face a mix of frustration and defeat. "You really think this is over?" she said, her tone sharp but quieter than usual. I set down my hammer and looked her straight in the eye. "It's over. Karen, you lost this battle the second you decided to bulldoze something that didn't belong to you. This bridge, it's not just wood and nail. It's my father's legacy. You don't get to touch that." She opened her mouth as if to argue, but no words came out. For once, Karen had nothing to say. She turned and walked away, slower this time, like she finally understood she'd been beaten at her own game. The next few days were peaceful, almost unnervingly so. No shouting, no HOA letters stuffed in my mailbox, no threats. I finished the bridge, staining it with a rich, warm color that made the wood glow under the sunlight. I even added a small bench at the midpoint, the perfect spot to sit and watch the water flow by. When the last nail was hammered in, I stood back and took it all in. The bridge stood proud, stronger than ever. My land was quiet again. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a deep sense of closure. That evening, John brought over a cooler of cold beer, and we sat on the new bridge as the sun dipped below the trees. "You know," he said, raising his bottle, "you taught everyone here a lesson. Karen thought she was untouchable, but you proved her wrong." I smiled, clinking my bottle against his. It wasn't just about proving her wrong. It was about standing up for what's mine. Some things are worth fighting for, no matter how loud the opposition gets. As the stars came out, I thought of my father. I imagined him sitting next to me, nodding in approval. "Good work, son," I could almost hear him say. That bridge was more than a piece of wood. It was a symbol of resilience, of not letting anyone rewrite your story. Karen never apologized, of course, but she stopped showing up at my property. And word around the neighborhood was that the HOA board was growing tired of her antics. It seemed that isolating her yard both literally and figuratively had made her realize she wasn't as powerful as she thought. I leaned back on the bench and watched the stream curl gently around her now lonely backyard. It felt like poetic justice. Karen had tried to destroy something meaningful, But in the end, she was the one who ended up trapped both by her own arrogance and by the stream I'd reshaped. I took a long breath, letting the cool night air fill my lungs. "Justice served," I murmured, smiling. And that's how I took back my land, my bridge, and my peace of mind. Sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about winning, it's about making sure your story is heard. If you've ever dealt with someone like Karen, you know how satisfying it feels when justice finally comes around. Thank you for sticking with me through this journey. If you enjoyed this story, take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that persistence pays off. Until next time, stay strong and keep building your own bridges, both the real ones and the ones that matter in life.